my wife stated. "I'm having surgery to stay childless always." I answered, "Your decision." Then I divorced her and married her best friend. The pregnancy news at Easter crushed her. Looking back, I should have seen the signs during our 3 years of marriage, but Miranda had always been good at presenting herself as the woman I thought I'd fallen in love with. I'm Jake, 32, an engineering consultant specializing in sustainable building design here in Denver. Miranda was finishing her medical residency at Presbyterian/St. Joseph, and we'd built what I thought was a solid foundation for our future together. We discussed children extensively during our engagement. She wanted 2, maybe 3 kids, and we'd agreed to start trying after she finished residency and we'd paid off her medical school loans. Everything was planned, methodical, the way I approach most things in life. That's probably why what happened at our anniversary dinner hit me like a freight train I never saw coming. We were at Garden Grace, this upscale steakhouse downtown that Miranda loved because it made her feel important when colleagues saw her there. I'd made reservations weeks in advance, even arranged for champagne to celebrate 3 years of what I thought was marital bliss. The conversation started normally enough, her residency stress, my latest project designing an eco-friendly housing development in Boulder, our upcoming vacation to Aspen. Then, somewhere between the main course and dessert, she dropped the bomb that would end our marriage. "I've been thinking about our future," she said, not making eye contact, instead studying her barely touched salmon like it contained the secrets of the universe. "I've scheduled a consultation for a hysterectomy." I set down my fork, thinking I'd misheard. What now? A hysterectomy. I want to make sure I never have children. Ever. Her voice was casual, like she was discussing changing our cable package. "I've realized that motherhood isn't for me, and I don't want to spend the next decade worrying about birth control failures or feeling pressured to reproduce just because that's what married couples do." The restaurant noise faded into background static as I processed what she'd just said. 3 years of marriage, 5 years of being together, countless conversations about baby names and school districts, and she was sitting there telling me she wanted surgical sterilization to ensure our carefully planned family would never exist. "When did you decide this?" I asked, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "Over the past few months. I've been seeing a therapist, working through my feelings about parenthood, and I've realized I was only saying I wanted kids because that's what you wanted to hear." She finally looked at me then, her expression defiant. "I'm not going to sacrifice my body and career for hypothetical children I don't actually want." I nodded slowly, taking a sip of the champagne that now tasted like vinegar. "Your body, your choice." She blinked, clearly expecting more of a fight. "That's it? You're not going to try to change my mind?" "Nope. If that's what you've decided, then that's what you've decided." I signaled the waiter for the check. "But you should know that this marriage was built on the premise that we were building a family together. If that's off the table, then we need to discuss what that means for us." Miranda's face changed then, confusion replacing the defensive certainty. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I married you because I thought we wanted the same things. If we don't, then maybe we're not as compatible as we thought." The check arrived, and I paid it without looking at the total. Walking to the parking garage, Miranda was unusually quiet. When we got home to our townhouse in Capitol Hill, she went straight to the bedroom while I sat in my home office, staring at my drafting table where I'd been sketching plans for converting the spare bedroom into a nursery. At 6 a.m. the next morning, while Miranda was pulling another 12-hour shift at the hospital, I called my brother Dave, who happened to be a divorce attorney here in Denver. "I need to dissolve my marriage," I told him. "Like, immediately." "Jesus, Jake, what happened?" "Long story. Bottom line is that Miranda has decided she never wants children, and she waited until our anniversary dinner to announce it. 3 years of marriage, 5 years together, and apparently she's been lying about wanting a family the entire time." Dave was quiet for a moment. "That's grounds for irreconcilable differences, definitely. Colorado's a no-fault state, so the process should be straightforward if you're both reasonable about it." I doubt she's going to be reasonable about anything. I was right. By 9 a.m., I'd emptied our joint investment accounts, money that came primarily from my inheritance when I sold my late father's construction business after he passed 2 years ago. I'd put that money into our shared future, thinking we were building something together. By noon, I'd loaded my truck with my engineering equipment, my tools, and everything that was solely mine. I left the divorce papers on the kitchen island next to the keys to the mountain cabin we'd bought in Breckenridge, the one we'd planned to use for family vacations and teaching our future kids to ski. The house felt hollow and strange with half the furniture gone, but I wasn't being vindictive. I only took what I'd brought into the marriage or bought with my own money. I left a note that I'd rewritten 3 times, trying to strike the right tone. Miranda, your decision to get a hysterectomy without discussing it with your husband first was absolutely your right. Your body, your choice, always. But continuing this marriage was my choice, and I'm choosing not to. The papers are self-explanatory. I'll be in touch through my attorney. When she came home that evening, exhausted from her shift, she found the house eerily quiet and half-empty. I was already in my hotel room across town, having dinner with Dave and planning my next move. The divorce proceedings turned into a battlefield faster than I'd anticipated, and Miranda's transformation from the woman I'd married into someone I barely recognized was both shocking and illuminating. Her lawyer, some shark named Patricia Hendricks who specialized in bleeding men dry during divorces, immediately demanded spousal support, claiming Miranda's medical residency salary of $55,000 couldn't sustain the lifestyle my engineering consulting income had provided. I made decent money, around $180,000 annually from my sustainable building design firm, but watching Miranda's legal team try to claim she was entitled to half of everything I'd built before she even existed in my life was infuriating. The real fight came over our Denver townhouse and especially over my custom workshop in the garage, where I'd spent countless evenings building furniture and dreaming about teaching woodworking to our future children. Miranda knew exactly what she was doing when her lawyer demanded the workshop equipment in the settlement. It wasn't about the monetary value of my tools, it was about destroying the physical space where I'd envisioned passing down skills to the next generation. She's trying to take everything that represents your dreams of fatherhood, Dave explained during one of our strategy sessions. The cabin where you planned family vacations, the workshop where you were going to teach kids to build things with their hands, even the goddamn rocking chair you'd already started making. Miranda's family rallied around her completely, hosting weekly dinners where they discussed my apparent midlife crisis and abandonment issues, like I was some kind of psychological case study rather than a man who'd been blindsided by his wife's deception. Her parents, both professors at University of Colorado, treated our divorce like an academic exercise in masculine fragility. Her younger brother Marcus, still in law school, kept posting passive-aggressive social media content about men who bail when women assert their autonomy. The irony wasn't lost on me that they were portraying Miranda as some kind of feminist hero for lying to her husband about wanting children for 5 years, then unilaterally changing the terms of our marriage without discussion. But the most unexpected development came from Harper, Miranda's best friend since college, who quietly reached out with an apologetic text message that would change everything. Jake, I know this is probably weird hearing from me, but I wanted you to know that I think Miranda handled this terribly. I'm sorry you're going through this. Harper and I had always maintained a polite but distant relationship during my marriage. She was Miranda's friend, not mine, and I'd always felt like the third wheel when the two of them got together for their weekly coffee dates or girls' nights. She was a freelance photographer, artistic and creative in ways that complemented Miranda's scientific mind, and I'd honestly never thought much about her beyond basic social pleasantries. But her text message opened a door I hadn't expected. We met for coffee at Crema Coffee House in Rhino, neutral territory where we were unlikely to run into Miranda or any of her hospital colleagues. Harper looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her camera strap and avoiding eye contact as she explained her perspective on my marriage's implosion. I told Miranda months ago that she needed to talk to you honestly about her changing feelings, Harper said, her voice barely above a whisper. She'd been seeing this therapist who was basically telling her that wanting children was internalized patriarchal pressure, and Miranda just absorbed that completely. But instead of having honest conversations with you, she decided that surprising you would be more decisive than enduring what she called lengthy negotiations. The picture Harper painted was devastating. Miranda had spent months planning this revelation, knowing it would destroy our marriage, and had chosen the most brutal possible delivery method. She actually told you she was going to blindside me like that? She said you'd either accept her decision and prove you loved her for who she was, or you'd leave and prove you only saw her as a breeding machine. She was convinced either outcome would be better than the status quo. Harper looked up at me then, and I saw genuine pain in her eyes. I tried to tell her she was being cruel, that marriages require discussion and compromise, but she said I didn't understand because I'd never been married. I learned that Miranda had been testing me in other ways too, making comments about friends who were child-free by choice, bringing up articles about women who regretted having children, gauging my reactions to see how rigid my position was. The whole thing had been an elaborate psychological experiment, and I'd been the unwitting subject. She thought you'd beg her to reconsider, Harper continued. When you just accepted her decision and left, it completely shattered her expectations. She's been calling me every night, crying about how you abandoned her instead of fighting for your marriage. Fighting for a marriage she'd already decided to end, I said. Exactly. But she won't see it that way. Miranda's always been able to rewrite history to make herself the victim. As Harper and I talked, I realized she understood the situation better than anyone else in Miranda's circle. She'd watched our marriage from the outside, seen the cracks I'd missed, and recognized the manipulation I'd been too close to identify. More importantly, she was the first person who didn't try to convince me I was overreacting or that I should have tried harder to save something that was already dead. What started as occasional coffee meetings to discuss Miranda's increasingly erratic behavior evolved into something I hadn't expected, a genuine friendship with someone who actually understood me. Harper became my unexpected confidant as we met at different coffee shops around Denver, initially bonding over our mutual concern about Miranda's mental state, but gradually discovering we had far more in common than I'd ever realized. She was passionate about hiking Colorado's 14ers, something Miranda had always dismissed as pointless suffering, and Harper's eyes lit up when I mentioned my goal of completing all 58 peaks before I turned 40. We discovered shared interests in vintage film photography. Harper still shot with her grandfather's old Leica, and sustainable architecture, which fascinated her from an artistic perspective. I always felt like an outsider when I was around you and Miranda, Harper admitted during one of our walks through Washington Park. She'd talk about your relationship like she was performing in a play, you know? Like she was acting the part of the devoted wife who wanted the white picket fence and babies, but it never felt genuine. Her observation hit me hard because it explained so much about my marriage that I'd rationalized away. Miranda's enthusiasm for house hunting had felt forced. Her interest in baby names had seemed academic rather than emotional. Even her excitement about the mountain cabin had been more about posting Instagram photos than actually creating family memories. You sensed that she was performing? I asked. From the beginning. Miranda's always been competitive about having the most impressive life, and you represented this stable, successful future she thought she wanted. But I could tell she was trying to convince herself as much as everyone else. Harper paused, kicking at fallen leaves on the path. She used to complain privately about feeling trapped by expectations, but then she'd post these perfect couple photos with captions about being blessed and finding her soulmate. Our conversations began shifting from analyzing Miranda to discovering who we were as individuals. Harper told me about her struggles building a freelance photography business, her dream of shooting for National Geographic, her complicated relationship with her artistic family who thought she should have gone to art school instead of teaching herself through trial and error. I found myself sharing things I'd never told Miranda, my guilt about selling my father's construction business instead of carrying on his legacy, my fear that I was too focused on planning to actually live in the moment, my growing sense that I'd been sleepwalking through my own life. Miranda used to say you were obsessed with the future, Harper said during a hike up Mount Sanitas. But I think you were just trying to build something meaningful with someone who didn't actually want to build anything. When Miranda discovered our friendship through Harper's Instagram stories, innocent photos of hiking trails and coffee shops that happened to include me in the background, she launched a calculated campaign to turn our mutual friends against both of us. Suddenly, I was hearing from people I'd known for years, asking pointed questions about whether I was rebounding with Miranda's best friend and whether Harper had been waiting in the wings during my marriage. Miranda's version of events, spread strategically through her network of medical colleagues and college friends, painted me as a man who'd abandoned his wife during her time of personal growth, then immediately started an affair with her closest friend. Harper bore the brunt of Miranda's fury, receiving late-night calls where Miranda accused her of being a manipulative homewrecker who'd been plotting to steal her husband from the beginning. "She's telling people I gave you advice about the divorce because I wanted you for myself," Harper told me, her voice shaking with anger and hurt. "Like I somehow orchestrated your entire marriage falling apart so I could swoop in afterward." The accusations were absurd, but they worked on some people. Miranda's college sorority sisters, her medical school classmates, even some of our mutual friends from the neighborhood began treating both Harper and me like pariahs. The social consequences were swift and brutal. Dinner invitations dried up, group texts went silent, and long-time friendships evaporated under the pressure of Miranda's narrative about betrayal and manipulation. But instead of driving us apart, Miranda's campaign brought Harper and me closer together. We found ourselves relying on each other for support as our social circle imploded, sharing the unique experience of being falsely accused by someone we'd both cared about. Harper's loyalty during this period impressed me more than any grand romantic gesture could have. She could have distanced herself from me to preserve her friendship with Miranda, but instead she stood her ground and defended both of us against accusations she knew were lies. "I've known Miranda for 12 years, Harper said during one particularly difficult evening after Miranda had convinced Harper's photography mentor to drop her from an upcoming exhibition. "But I've never seen her be deliberately cruel like this. It's like she's become someone else entirely." What Harper didn't know yet was that Miranda's behavior was about to get much worse, and our friendship was about to evolve into something that would give Miranda's accusations a twisted kind of truth, though nothing like the manipulative conspiracy she'd imagined. Our relationship evolved naturally during weekend camping trips to Rocky Mountain National Park, where we found solace away from Miranda's constant social media surveillance and the harassment campaign she was waging against both of us. Harper knew all the hidden gems, secluded campsites near alpine lakes where cell service was non-existent and we could actually breathe without wondering who might be watching or reporting back to Miranda. Those trips became my salvation during the ugliest parts of the divorce proceedings, when Miranda's lawyer was demanding forensic accounting of every penny I'd earned during our marriage and Miranda herself was showing up at my job sites, causing scenes that were affecting my professional reputation. "She came to the Boulder housing development yesterday," I told Harper during a hike to Emerald Lake. "Made this whole dramatic speech to my crew about how I'd abandoned her in her time of need and how men like me destroy women who try to assert their independence." Harper stopped walking, her face flushed with anger. "She's completely lost it. This has gone way beyond hurt feelings into something genuinely unhinged." Those mountain conversations revealed how perfectly aligned Harper and I were on everything that mattered. We both wanted children, both valued building something lasting rather than just accumulating experiences, both believed in the kind of partnership where two people made each other stronger rather than competing for dominance. Harper talked about her childhood dreams of having a big family, how she'd always imagined teaching her kids to see the world through a camera lens, how she wanted to create the kind of stable, loving home she'd never quite had growing up with artistic parents who prioritized their careers over family dinners and bedtime stories. "Miranda used to make fun of how traditional my dreams were," Harper admitted as we sat by a campfire near Bear Lake. "She said I was wasting my potential by wanting to be someone's wife and mother instead of building an empire." I realized that Harper had been suffering through her own version of what I'd experienced with Miranda, being made to feel small for wanting conventional happiness, being told that commitment and family were somehow lesser goals than individual achievement and endless self-optimization. The night everything changed between us was during a 3-day backpacking trip in the Indian Peaks wilderness, when a sudden thunderstorm forced us to shelter together in Harper's small tent. We'd been friends for months by then, but something about the intimacy of that moment, listening to rain on the tent walls, sharing body heat, talking in whispers so we wouldn't wake imaginary neighbors, shifted the dynamic between us irreversibly. "I need to tell you something," Harper said in the darkness. "I think I'm falling in love with you." I'd been fighting the same feelings for weeks, trying to convince myself that my growing attraction to Harper was just rebound emotions or gratitude for her support during the divorce. But hearing her voice, those words made me realize I'd been lying to myself about what was happening between us. "I love you too," I said, and kissing her felt like the most natural thing in the world. We decided to keep our relationship secret until the divorce was finalized, knowing that Miranda would use any evidence of romance between us to complicate the legal proceedings and validate her narrative about our supposed affair. But more than that, we wanted to protect something precious and new from the toxicity Miranda was spreading through our lives. We were both exhausted from being public figures in her revenge fantasy. Keeping our love private felt like reclaiming some small measure of peace. 6 months later, when my divorce was finally settled and Harper and I had been quietly dating without any of the drama or performance that had characterized my marriage, I proposed during a sunrise hike to Mount Elbert, Colorado's highest peak. She said yes before I'd even finished asking the question, and we eloped the following week in a small ceremony at Garden of the Gods with only Harper's photographer colleague Maria as our witness. The ceremony was everything my first wedding hadn't been: intimate, genuine, focused on promises we actually intended to keep rather than public declarations designed to impress other people. Harper wore a simple white dress she'd bought at a vintage shop in Boulder. I wore the suit I'd gotten married in the first time but had never felt comfortable wearing, and we exchanged vows we'd written ourselves about building a life together based on honesty and shared dreams rather than performance and expectation. When Harper moved into my new condo in Boulder, I'd sold the Denver townhouse to Miranda as part of the settlement. We converted the spare bedroom into a combined photography studio and woodworking space, symbolically merging our creative lives in ways I'd never been able to do with Miranda. Harper loved watching me work with my hands, was genuinely interested in my sustainable building projects, and began incorporating architectural elements into her photography that made both our work stronger. We started discussing our own family timeline immediately, with Harper expressing genuine excitement about having children and me finally feeling heard and understood by a partner who shared my values about legacy and building something meaningful for the next generation. "I want to document everything," Harper said, her hand on her still flat stomach just 2 months after our wedding. "Our pregnancy, the birth, watching them grow up. I want to create this visual history of our family that they'll have forever." I was building a crib in our combined workshop, using techniques my father had taught me and tools that Miranda had tried to take in the divorce, when Harper told me she was pregnant with twins. Harper's grandmother hosted Easter brunch at her sprawling Victorian house in Colorado Springs every year, and this gathering would become the setting for the most explosive confrontation I'd ever witnessed. Eleanor Chen was 83 years old, a retired family court judge who'd built her reputation on cutting through bullshit and protecting children from destructive adults, and she'd taken an immediate liking to me when Harper first brought me to meet the family. Harper had spent weeks preparing a special photo album for the announcement, professional quality images documenting our elopement at Garden of the Gods, followed by artistic shots of our combined workshop and our Boulder condo, culminating in the ultrasound photographs that revealed we were expecting twins. She designed it like a visual story, each page building toward the revelation that would change our lives forever. What we hadn't anticipated was that Miranda would be there. Harper had maintained a fragile friendship with a few people from her college circle, including her roommate Jessica, who'd invited Miranda as her +1 without knowing about the ongoing drama between us. Jessica had been studying abroad during most of the divorce proceedings and was genuinely oblivious to the warfare Miranda had been waging against Harper and me through social media and mutual friends. "I brought Miranda because she seemed so lonely," Jessica whispered to Harper when they arrived. "She's been having a really hard time since the divorce, and I thought being around family friends might cheer her up." Miranda looked terrible. She'd lost significant weight, her hair was lank and unwashed, and she had the hollow-eyed appearance of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. She'd clearly been struggling since our divorce finalized, and part of me felt genuine sympathy for her obvious pain. But that sympathy evaporated the moment she saw me sitting next to Harper at the dining table, wearing a wedding ring she hadn't noticed yet. The Easter brunch proceeded normally for the first hour, with Eleanor regaling the extended family with stories from her decades on the family court bench and Harper's teenage cousins showing off their latest TikTok videos. Harper and I were waiting for the perfect moment to make our announcement when Eleanor stood up and clinked her wine glass, commanding attention from the assembled crowd of about 20 people. Harper has something special to share with all of us, Eleanor announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to controlling courtrooms. But first, I want to say how proud I am of the woman she's become, and how happy I am that she's found someone who appreciates her remarkable heart. Harper stood up, her hands slightly shaking as she held the custom photo album she'd spent weeks perfecting. Jake and I wanted to share some news with everyone, she began, opening to the first page showing our elopement ceremony. We got married 3 months ago in a small ceremony, and... She turned to the ultrasound pages, her voice growing stronger with excitement. We're expecting twins this fall. The room erupted in congratulations and excitement, with family members rushing to examine the photographs and offer hugs. Eleanor was crying happy tears, Harper's cousins were shrieking with excitement about becoming aunties, and even Jessica was clapping with genuine joy despite her confusion about the timeline. But Miranda was sitting frozen in her chair, staring at the ultrasound images like they were evidence of some cosmic betrayal. I watched the exact moment when the full magnitude of what she was seeing hit her, not just that Harper and I were married, but that we were building the family she'd rejected, creating the future she'd destroyed, living the life she'd convinced herself she didn't want until she realized someone else was going to have it instead. You planned this, Miranda said, her voice cutting through the celebration like a knife. You planned all of this from the beginning. The room went silent as everyone turned to look at her. Harper closed the photo album, her face pale but determined. Miranda, I know this is probably difficult to hear, but Jake and I didn't even start dating until after his divorce was finalized. Bullshit. Miranda stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You were feeding him information about me, turning him against me, manipulating the whole situation so you could swoop in and steal my husband the second I showed any independence. Eleanor's expression had shifted from confusion to the steely look she'd perfected during 40 years of dealing with unstable people in family court. Young lady, you need to lower your voice and control yourself. Control myself? Miranda's voice was rising to a shout. This woman destroyed my marriage. She convinced Jake to leave me the second I made one decision about my own body, and now she's flaunting my life like some kind of trophy. Harper stood up, trying to maintain dignity in the face of Miranda's escalating hysteria. Miranda, you told Jake you were getting a hysterectomy to ensure you never had children. You ended your own marriage. Because you told me he'd never accept it. You said he was too controlling, too traditional, that he'd leave me if I didn't want kids right away. Miranda was screaming now, tears and mascara streaming down her face. You manipulated me into sabotaging my own relationship. The accusation was so insane, so detached from reality, that I finally spoke up. Miranda, Harper never told you to blindside me with a hysterectomy announcement. That was your choice, your strategy, your decision to destroy our marriage without discussion. She stole my entire future. Miranda lunged across the table, reaching for the photo album like she could destroy the evidence of our happiness. Harper pulled it away just in time, but Miranda managed to grab several loose photographs, tearing them in half before Eleanor's grandson Marcus could restrain her. This should be my life. These should be my babies. She planned this for years, waiting for me to make one mistake so she could take everything I worked for. The scene devolved into chaos as multiple family members tried to calm Miranda down while she continued screaming about Harper's supposed long-term manipulation and my betrayal. Eleanor called the police when Miranda tried to physically attack Harper, requiring 3 adults to hold her back while she shrieked accusations about stolen futures and planned betrayals. The last thing Miranda screamed as Jessica dragged her out of the house was, I never wanted that hysterectomy. It was all a test. You were supposed to fight for me. And suddenly, everything made sense. Harper's family, initially shocked by our secret marriage and pregnancy announcement, rallied around us completely after witnessing Miranda's unhinged behavior and learning the full timeline of events from Eleanor's pointed questioning. Eleanor, drawing on 4 decades of family court experience, had immediately recognized the signs of someone rewriting history to avoid accountability for their own destructive choices. That young woman is what we used to call a chaos agent, Eleanor told the assembled family after Miranda's dramatic exit. She creates crisis and conflict, then plays the victim when people respond rationally to her manipulation. I've seen it 1,000 times in custody cases. The contrast between families was stark and telling. While Harper's relatives were processing the revelation that Miranda's hysterectomy announcement had been an elaborate test designed to manipulate me into proving my devotion, Miranda's own family was doubling down on their support for her increasingly erratic behavior. Her parents, both psychology professors at UC Boulder, had apparently been enabling Miranda's victim narrative by providing academic justification for her actions, calling my immediate departure a form of emotional abandonment, and framing Harper's friendship with me as predatory behavior typical of women who target vulnerable men during relationship transitions. The difference in family dynamics became even more apparent when Miranda's behavior escalated beyond social media harassment into actual stalking. She began showing up at my construction sites, sometimes bringing her mother along for moral support, creating scenes that were affecting my professional reputation and making my crew uncomfortable. My project foreman, a 60-year-old guy named Carlos who'd worked with my father for 20 years, finally had to threaten to call security when Miranda started approaching my clients with stories about how I'd emotionally abused her during our marriage. "Boss, that woman is gonna cost you contracts if she keeps this up," Carlos warned me after Miranda had cornered Mrs. Patterson, the client for our sustainable housing development, with a 40-minute monologue about my supposed character defects. Mrs. Patterson asked me if you were safe to have around her grandchildren. Meanwhile, Miranda's campaign against Harper became even more vicious and personal. She somehow gained access to Harper's photography equipment during a wedding shoot at the Denver Botanic Gardens and vandalized thousands of dollars worth of camera gear with what appeared to be car keys. Harper lost the entire wedding contract when the bride's photographs were ruined, and the resulting lawsuit from the wedding party threatened to destroy Harper's business entirely. "She's not just trying to hurt us emotionally anymore," Harper said, surveying the damage to her cameras with tears in her eyes. "She's trying to destroy our livelihoods." Eleanor's response to Miranda's escalation was swift and decisive. Using her connections in the legal community, she helped Harper file restraining orders and contacted the hospital administration about Miranda's increasingly unstable behavior affecting her medical residency performance. "I've written family court recommendations that kept children away from less destructive parents than this," Eleanor told us during a family dinner. "Miranda needs professional help, but more importantly, you two need legal protection from someone who's clearly lost touch with reality." The professional consequences for Miranda began accumulating rapidly. Her residency supervisor, Dr. Richard Hayes, called a formal meeting after receiving multiple complaints about Miranda's personal drama spilling into the hospital environment. She'd been using hospital computers to monitor Harper's social media during her shifts, had been discussing her personal grievances with patients during medical consultations, and had missed several important procedures because she was too distracted by her vendetta against us to focus on her medical responsibilities. Harper's photography business, ironically, began flourishing in the aftermath of Miranda's vandalism incident when the story spread through Denver's wedding industry. Vendors and other photographers rallied around Harper, referring clients specifically because they admired how she'd handled the crisis with grace and professionalism. The wedding party whose photos Miranda had ruined ended up hiring Harper for their first anniversary shoot after seeing how devastated she was about the destroyed memories, and their social media posts about Harper's integrity generated more referrals than any advertising campaign could have achieved. "It's like Miranda's attempts to destroy us are backfiring spectacularly," Harper observed as we reviewed her booking calendar, which was fuller than it had ever been. "Every time she tries to hurt us, we end up stronger." Eleanor's influence in the community also proved invaluable when Miranda's parents attempted to interfere with our lives through their academic connections. Dr. Susan Miranda, Miranda's mother and a prominent child psychology professor, had been spreading rumors through the university network about my abandonment patterns and Harper's manipulative tendencies, trying to damage both our professional reputations through academic gossip. But Eleanor's 40-year reputation for integrity and her extensive network of legal and academic contacts shut down those rumors quickly. "I made some phone calls," Eleanor told us with the satisfied smile of someone who just outmaneuvered an opponent. Dr. Miranda has been politely reminded that spreading unsubstantiated claims about private citizens could constitute defamation, especially when those citizens are expecting their first children and trying to build stable family lives. The final turning point came when Miranda's own brother Marcus, the law student who'd been posting passive-aggressive social media content about my supposed character flaws, witnessed one of Miranda's stalking incidents at my boulder construction site and realized how far his sister had deteriorated from the person he'd grown up with. "Jake, I owe you an apology," Marcus said when he called me directly. "I thought Miranda was just hurt and needed family support, but what I saw today, that wasn't my sister anymore. That was someone who needs serious mental health intervention." With her own family finally beginning to recognize the extent of Miranda's problems and professional consequences mounting from her inability to maintain appropriate boundaries, the harassment campaign against Harper and me began to lose steam. But Miranda herself was far from finished, and the final revelation about her hysterectomy deception would prove to be the most devastating twist yet. Harper and I spent the summer preparing our nursery using the custom woodworking tools I'd originally planned to pass down to children with Miranda, creating a rocking chair and matching cribs that represented our fresh start together and our commitment to building something lasting for the next generation. Every evening after work, I'd retreat to our combined workshop while Harper edited photographs at her computer nearby, both of us working on our respective crafts in comfortable silence that felt like the partnership I'd always imagined marriage should be. The rocking chair was made from reclaimed wood salvaged from my father's old construction projects, each piece carrying memories of the man who'd taught me that building something with your hands was a form of love made tangible. Harper documented the entire process with her camera, creating a visual record of how we were literally and figuratively constructing our family's future from the foundation up. "These babies are going to know exactly how much they were wanted," Harper said, her hand resting on her growing belly as she photographed me sanding the crib rails. "They'll see these pictures someday and understand that we built their first furniture with our own hands, that every detail was planned with love." Miranda's attempts to reconcile and reclaim what she now called her rightful place in my life failed spectacularly when she finally understood that Harper was everything she'd only pretended to be. While Miranda had performed the role of supportive wife who shared my dreams of family and legacy, Harper genuinely embraced those values as her own. Miranda had treated my woodworking hobby as a quaint distraction from more important pursuits, but Harper saw it as an extension of my character and encouraged me to teach neighborhood children basic carpentry skills in our garage workshop. The contrast became painfully obvious during Miranda's final, desperate attempt to win me back. She showed up at our Boulder condo on a Tuesday evening in September. 8 months pregnant Harper was editing photos on the couch while I put finishing touches on the second crib. Miranda looked healthier than she had at Easter. She'd clearly been working with a therapist and had gained back some of the weight she'd lost during her breakdown, but there was still something hollow about her appearance, like she was going through the motions of recovery without actually healing. "Jake, I need to tell you the truth about everything," she said when I answered the door, refusing Harper's polite offer to give us privacy. "The hysterectomy was never real. I never scheduled any surgery. It was all a test to see how much you really loved me, how hard you'd fight to keep our marriage together." Harper looked up from her laptop, her expression shifting from polite concern to dawning understanding. I felt something cold settle in my stomach as the implications became clear. "A test," I said slowly. "You destroyed our marriage with a fake medical procedure to test my devotion." I know it sounds crazy now, but my therapist at the time said that couples need to challenge each other, that comfortable relationships become stagnant. She suggested I create a scenario that would force you to prove your commitment beyond just going through the motions of planning our future. Miranda's voice was gaining strength as she spoke, like she was convincing herself as much as me. "I thought you'd fight for us, prove that you loved me enough to work through anything. Instead, you just left." Harper stood up carefully, her pregnancy making quick movements difficult, and walked over to stand beside me. "Miranda, you lied to your husband about never wanting children, then blamed him for believing you. That's not testing commitment, that's emotional abuse." "You don't understand," Miranda snapped, her composure cracking. "Jake and I had something real, something you could never compete with honestly. You had to wait for me to make one mistake, one moment of weakness, so you could swoop in and steal my life. I looked at this woman I'd once planned to spend forever with, seeing clearly for the first time how fundamentally different we were. Miranda, you didn't make one mistake. You spent months planning to deceive me in the cruelest way possible, then blamed me for responding exactly how any rational person would. That's not weakness, that's who you are. The visit ended with Miranda crying on our front porch, begging me to remember what we'd once meant to each other, promising she'd changed and learned from her mistakes. But Harper and I both understood that Miranda's version of change meant finding better ways to manipulate situations to her advantage, not actually developing empathy or integrity. 6 weeks later, Harper gave birth to healthy twins, Emma and Michael, and my workshop finally became the place I'd always dreamed it would be. As the babies grew into toddlers, our garage filled with neighborhood children every Saturday morning as I taught basic woodworking skills to anyone interested in learning. Emma and Michael would toddle around the workspace in tiny safety goggles, handing me sandpaper and soaking up the atmosphere of creation and learning that I'd always envisioned sharing with my children. Harper documented everything with her camera, first steps taken between workbenches, tiny hands learning to hold junior hammers, the proud expressions when kids completed their first birdhouse or pencil holder. Her photography business evolved to specialize in family documentation, creating visual legacies for other parents who understood the importance of preserving these fleeting moments when children still believe their parents can build anything. Miranda eventually moved to California for a fresh start, accepting a residency position at UCSF where nobody knew about her breakdown or the chaos she'd created in Denver. Through mutual friends, I heard she'd married a fellow doctor within 2 years, someone wealthy enough to support the lifestyle she'd always craved but too busy with his own career to notice her manipulative tendencies until it was too late. From our kitchen window, I could sometimes see her old apartment building across town, now occupied by a young couple with a baby stroller parked outside. Harper would catch me looking occasionally and remind me that curiosity about someone's current situation wasn't the same as missing them or regretting the choices that led us to our current happiness. She gave you the greatest gift imaginable, Harper said one evening as we watched Emma and Michael help me organize tools in the workshop. She showed you exactly who she was before you wasted more years trying to build a future with someone who didn't actually want to build anything at all.